We're going to go ahead and get started, everyone. I am confident that Malik's email will allow the others who aren't here yet to arrive rather quickly. So, um, as was mentioned at the top of the call, we are recording this session. Elements of the session that are recorded will be shared out afterwards. And that is very intentional. This is meant to be educational. This is meant to be helpful. And we want you to be able to go back and reference what we've shared today. So with that, I want to welcome people to introduce themselves in the chat, and also feel free to ask questions in the chat, which will be looked at, will be moderated by others, so that we'll make sure to get as many questions answered as we can. And then also for those that aren't answered now, they'll be shared, the answers will be shared later. So first off, you can see what we're talking about here today. It's the Large Event Facilities Act. This was passed in June, July of last year. The governor signed it into effect, and then January 1st, 2025 was when SB 2876 was actually a public act. And we want to cover what the objectives are, so you can understand, what was going to be shared in the next hour and a half, and also to understand what the intent of engagement with venues and other stakeholders is. Number one, we want to improve awareness of this public act and the requirements associated with it. And the target group, the target audience for this information is you all, for the venues, as it said in the invitation, the facility operators, the vendors, everyone who makes the show go on, or the game. And so in addition to that, we have invited some presenters to share examples of successful programs, how recycling and composting has been implemented, sharing just straight up, honestly, what works, what hasn't, challenges as well as successes. And also specifically focusing in on procurement, it's very important that we're aligning what is being used in the facility with the available infrastructure for recycling and composting. So we'll touch on that as well. Providing a forum for discussion is key. And so you'll see in the agenda, there are intentional spaces available to hear from you all who are here, who have questions. And then lastly, we're going to share the current versions of some tools that have been pulled together, some resources that are collaboratively getting brought together into the toolkit that exists. So we will start with mentioning, I think the agenda got lost somehow. But let me see. I might just be able to tell you because that's weird. Okay, here's the agenda. It got out of order. Here's the agenda. So we're welcoming you. We're going to share some examples of the way Cook County framed the approach to this Large Event Facilities Act. A lot of things are in process, and Cook County was kind enough to bring forth what the enforcement, what the education, what the program might look like. And so that will be shared. Additionally, I have lots of things open right now. Additionally, we will have a panel of local venue and vendors, and we'll have discussion as mentioned after that, so you can share your successes and challenges. The toolkit will be discussed, and then what's really critical is we want to hear from those of you who are here about what's missing, what needs to be put in to enhance what the toolkit is. And then we'll have some closing remarks and we'll get you out of here. But there'll be time for your feedback and questions and answers. So going back to this screen here is sharing what the venues are who are impacted by this requirement. And as you can see throughout the state, we have it's a total of just under 90, I think, currently tracked venues that are impacted by the 3,500 or greater capacity regulation. And about half are statewide outside of Cook County, and the other half are within Cook County uh, jurisdiction. And I should note in the chat, Malik thank you, Malik has put in links to the Google Maps that these are just images of the presentation itself has links to these Google Maps, but in there you can click on any pin as in other Google Maps and see the name of the facility as well as the address. So feel free to look at that at a later moment. Additionally, we wanted to share with you just to get a feeling for who's in the room, for you to know what sectors are represented. So based on your registration or what we know about the participants, there are about a third of facilities themselves or food service operators who are working in the venues. Another little less than a third, 27% is government entities. And with the government, that includes, thankfully, healthcare departments and other folks from different sectors, agencies, and municipalities. In the composting category, we did have a lot of compost operators as well as haulers, and you can read the rest yourself. But I do want to just call out that in the advocacy 5% includes some folks who have offered assistance on technical assistance. And then in the advocacy realm, there's people from universities. Just get a feeling of who's here. And, what we want some of the venues to know that you're here to learn likely about infrastructure and kind of what is going to be helpful to you. But there's also people here who are not affected by this regulation. Not only are they venues that aren't, but food manufacturers or food distribution businesses. And what this tells me is that this legislation, it's a clear sign that this legislation brings strength to the overall food and waste system. When we're growing the infrastructure, we're also providing businesses with greater access to hauling and processing. And then not only are they able to divert waste through composting, but haulers benefit from route density. It decreases the embedded cost of the services that they provide. So really, this goes beyond the venues. It really is an infrastructure conversation and a state conversation. So, the venues, you need to get the trash out as soon as possible so you can load out and get ready for the next show. And that's and to do it cost effectively. This is all supporting kind of getting to there. So, and based on the responses of folks who registered, we heard the venues ask a few questions. I want everyone to hear these, and I want the presenters to be aware when it comes time to talk, to kind of acknowledge these questions. But, how are other venues navigating front of house composting? What are some ways to streamline it? Composters want to know, can collection vendors send contaminant-free loads to composters, or will material be sorted beforehand? Kind of who's doing what. That's I think what a lot of people want to understand today. So again, looking at the agenda, we want to encourage you, where we've noted discussion, to be ready to share your successes as they might inspire others, and also your challenges as they're likely the challenges or concerns of others, if not a problem that others have solved. So with that, I want to introduce our hosts. We will start with Claire.
Great, thanks, Steph. My name is Claire Ryan. I am the current board president of the Illinois Recycling Foundation. Just in case you're not familiar with us, IRF is a 501(c)(3) organization focused on education and networking broadly across sectors and across recyclable material types in the diversion and recycling space. Our organization has 45 years of history that we're very proud of. We're a member-supported organization, so if you'd like to check out what we're about, I do encourage you to take a look on illinoisrecycles.org and consider joining as a member. And then we also want to make sure folks are aware of the Illinois Circularity Conference. This is a joint effort between IRF and two other statewide recycling groups. It's going to be happening this fall on October 14th and 15th in East Peoria. I've put the URL up there as well. And it's looking fairly likely that there will be some discussion of this law and how it's being implemented through the first big event season that it's been in effect. So we're looking forward to that. Please do save the date, and I'll see you there. And I'll pass it back to Steph.
Thank you, Claire. Benjamin, would you like to introduce yourself and the organization?
Benjamin Krumstok with the Illinois Food Scrap and Composting Coalition. The organization was born out of the idea of food scrap diversion, and it's evolved and matured. So it's an all organics agenda, including the food scrap agenda. And we really touch all touch points. We are a full spectrum from the general homeowner who wants to just divert the food scraps through the haulers and the processing facilities themselves. And a new and important, high priority is getting that compost into Illinois soils. If we don't have the circularity, the whole system breaks down. So this is a really hot topic. We want to be able to divert these organics, these food organics. We need to make sure that the compost facilities get clean materials so that they can work with them and make this succeed. If you could advance the slide, I just want to mention that we have a We Compost program, We Compost recognition program. So if you're already composting, if you're diverting your food organics, or you're doing some on-site composting, physically processing the materials, touch base. And if you're going out to a restaurant and you want to choose a place that has your shared values, head on to the website, take a peek, find that restaurant, support them, let them know that you found them by way of the We Compost program. We have an International Compost Awareness Week program that's going to be extensive and exciting. It's something that's nationally, the theme is nationally selected. And this year it's Sustainable Communities Begin with Compost. So check out the website. A lot of information will drop in the next few days, and we'll hope to see you there. Consider joining the group, helping us to advance the overall agenda. Thanks.
Thank you, Benjamin. And Joy, if you could introduce CSTF.
Yes, absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Joy Rifkin. I'm the Director of Sustainability at LRS, a waste hauler that is committed to strengthening organic infrastructure for composting. But I'm also one of the directors and leaders of Chicago's Sustainability Task Force. This is a collaborative community of over 100 sustainability practitioners. We come together every other month to share best practices, network, talk about hurdles that we're facing, and really just having this strong web throughout Chicagoland. We're really excited to be here. Steph is instrumental to the Chicago Sustainability Task Force and excited to be in this conversation. Our next gathering is May 15th at the Degrowth Institute. That's going to be really amazing. If you haven't been, join us. You can scan this QR code, sign up to become a member, and get an invite for May. And we have our summer social in July at the Chicago Children's Museum. So we'd love to have you there to have more conversations about composting. Pass back to you, Steph.
Thanks, Joy. And Claire, we've got one more slide.
Yep. So I would we would be remiss if we didn't express appreciation for the sponsors of this webinar. They help us, IRF and the Food Scrap and Composting Coalition are, we're nonprofits. We don't have huge budgets, and we very much appreciate these companies' willingness to chip in. We've got Bradley Works, Sustainable Culinary, focused on optimizing, regenerating, and sustaining in the culinary space. Smart Waste Sorting, Real-Time Insights. They're actually, Smart is offering a free trial to venues interested in collecting data, real-time data on on the material they're diverting and when they're implementing LIFA. And we will email a little bit more about that out with the recording after the fact. And our friends at Waste Not Compost, clean, convenient, compromise-free compost collection, both in the residential and commercial space in the Chicago area, greater Chicago area. So thank you again so much.
Thank you, Claire. And without further ado, I'd like to pass the mic to Anthony.
Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you all for attending today's conference call. Anthony Tyndall, Solid Waste Coordinator for Cook County. So I just want to give some context before we get into the meat about what we're thinking about doing here in Cook County. So our next slide, please. So just to give some context, the Cook County Department of Environment and Sustainability, we regulate the solid waste industry within suburban Cook County. We also provide countywide leadership, resources, and technical assistance to various stakeholders that implement zero waste and circular economy related practices and initiatives. So that's why we're a part of this call. Next slide. So for folks who are coming from outside of Cook County, just to give some more context, we're talking about 5.1 million residents who live in over 2 million households in 134 different municipalities in Cook County. These residents and the work that we're doing right now in terms of landfill diversion, we've got a lot of growth that we need to do. Right now, we're only recycling 14% of materials and only diverting 19% of materials away from the landfill. This means that 81% of the materials that are collected eventually get landfilled. So we have a lot of room to grow. Next slide. So just to give some more numbers, we broke it up for you in terms of what is being generated in landfill coming from Chicago and coming from the suburbs. And just to give you all some indication of some possibilities in terms of where we should be going with our recycling, but then also with the food. Next slide for you. Right now, we're projecting around 311,000 tons of food being sent to landfills. Cook County is the home of over 760,000 residents who are food insecure. And so part of our goal, in addition to landfill diversion, is trying to figure out ways of how we can provide resources to our residents who are in need, specifically those residents who are food insecure. Next slide. And so to that aim, one of the biggest aims of our updated solid waste management plan is reducing our waste by 45% by the year 2030. So we have a long way to go. There's no way we can do that without looking at our infrastructure, without looking at how we're educating the public, and without working on legislative projects like the large event recycling, facility recycling composting bill. Next slide. We have gotten to work. So for the last couple of years, we have put skin in the game. We created a recycling drop-off station called the Charm Center. That Charm Center so far, last 2 years, we've collected over 2 million pounds of materials that have been recycled. We are about to have a ground opening ceremony next month that will kick off the building of our household hazardous waste facility that will open this winter. We also did receive a small grant from the USDA, but this grant will allow us to add a food scrap composting program at the Charm Center, along with giving out over 1,500 free food scrap containers to the residents in the south suburbs. And we also conducted a Charm on Wheels recycling event program where we're going around Cook County and collecting materials that will eventually be recycled. Next slide. The other things that we've been working on is we last month officially rolled out a municipal recycling grant program. We gave over $1 million to the villages of Posen, Phoenix, and Dixmoor to add curbside recycling services. These are environmental justice designated communities. We gave them the resources that they need to provide recycling services for their residents for the next 3 to 4 years. And we're really excited about that grant program and expanding it to other parts of the county. And then finally, we've been working on this large event recycling bill. So next slide. So in that effort, we have been working very closely with our counterparts of the City of Chicago Department of Environment, the City of Chicago Department of Streets and Sanitation, the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency, the Illinois Recycling Foundation, the Illinois Food Scrap Composting Association, other county governments, to think about how we are going to enforce this law within our specific jurisdictions. This group of partners has helped co-host 2 different stakeholder engagement meetings with event venues, recyclers, composters, circularity folks, reuse folks, and all of these other, and a lot of other stakeholders. We've also communicated both via email and phone calls to some of our event venues and facilities and elected officials. And we have coordinated enforcement meetings to learn best practices from other states and jurisdictions around the country that have already implemented legislation such as LEFA. We've identified over 50 local event facilities that will need to comply with this law within Cook County, suburban, and City of Chicago. And then finally, what we're working on right now is the proposed draft ordinance of how we are planning to enforce this law within our jurisdiction. Next slide. So just to give you some more clarity before we get into the heart of these things, I just want to talk about what my role is at Department of Environment, Cook County. So Cook County, as I said in the beginning, we regulate the suburban solid waste agency, solid waste industry. So we will be, the proposed ordinance that we've drafted will regulate the event facilities in suburban Cook County. The City of Chicago is responsible for regulating the facilities that are within the city proper. So 2 different impacts regarding the draft ordinance that we are having conversations about. Part of the draft ordinance includes quarterly reporting requirements for event facilities. This is in alignment with the quarterly reporting requirements for other facilities that our department regulates. And then it also provides clarity that recycling materials and organic waste collected must be diverted from the waste stream and transferred to a properly permitted recycling facility, composting facility, anaerobic digester facility, and/or a food donation center. And then the main parts of the draft ordinance that we're thinking about is having a phased-in approach in terms of how we're going to enforce this law. These recommended phased-in approach was advised, suggested, recommended to us and the other regulators at the various large event stakeholder calls that we had earlier this year and late last year. So the phased-in approach that we're talking about is having a back of house focus for the first year of implementation. Please keep in mind right now, what you're seeing is June 1st, 2025. That might change depending on when when the ordinance actually gets to the board. We will provide event facilities sometime before some time to comply with the law before the ordinance actually gets passed, or before it gets to the board. So that date might change, but our approach right now is have a back of house focus for the first year of implementation of this law. When we talk about back of house, we're talking about indoor kitchens, catering locations, food preparation areas, private conference rooms, and employee break rooms. The reason why event facilities requested a phased-in approach is they wanted to have more time to try out best practices, to find lessons learned, to acquire the different containers and practice and system training, to implement training systems for their staff for the implementation of a front of house operation. And so they recommended this phased in approach. And so the phase 2 of our operation would begin the year after the back of house enforcement begins. And that will include for the entire facility. So that's what we're thinking about right now. Next slide. We've got a lot more that we're working on, and that a lot more work that needs to be done. So we are supporting the creation and local rollout of IEPA's toolkit. They'll talk about the toolkit. We will be providing some additional information for local event facilities, recyclers, composters. That will be an addendum to IEPA's toolkit that they're going to talk about. We are drafting a local Cook County resource guide and directory to support event venues. We are developing our own enforcement inspection checklist that will be made public. We will be developing a dedicated Lefa County webpage on our website to talk about this law, our requirements. It'll include information about the toolkit, provide resources and other important information. We will continue to coordinate with local impacted event facilities about this law. We want to work with event facilities. We're not going to be heavy-handed. Our approach is not to be heavy-handed when this rolls out. We really want to work with event facilities and provide them the support, technical resources, assistance that they need in order to fully comply with this law. And so to that vein, we have updated our own Cook County Bright program. It's the Business Reducing Environmental Pollution program. And this program is really, really important because it's going to include free facility assessments for impacted event venues. In addition, we are looking at other ways of how we can support venues, and that information will be coming out in the coming months. And then finally, after all of this is completed, we will be submitting our draft ordinance and plans to the Board of Commissioners for their approval of our local ordinance. Next slide. Okay, so that's all I have. I did put my email information in the chat. Please feel free to call me or email me if any event venue or other stakeholder has any questions, suggestions, or want to talk about what our draft ordinance. We are here, we are running, we really want to help support event venues and our other stakeholders and making sure that we roll out something that is sustainable for the long haul. So please help us out. Let's be in communication and talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anthony. And I really do think people should know that the lead that Cook County has taken, and Anthony specifically and his staff have taken to transform this legislation that was passed into something that's an legislation that can be implemented, a policy that can be implemented. Just, I feel like I've taken a master class in how stuff goes down behind the scenes, just to see people who sincerely aren't looking at this about how do we, make businesses be compliant? How do we make people uphold? It's what can we do to support those affected, those impacted by this legislation? It's not venues that must comply. Whenever you're talking about them, Anthony, you're always saying the impacted venues. So venues are impacted by this legislation. How can we support them to comply? And, it's not a shame that compliance is necessary because it's really good for the environment and business too. We're just in a transitionary phase. So thank you, Anthony. I really do applaud the work that you're doing and Cook County is doing. So with that, I want to welcome our next presenters. So I'm going to first pin my friend Dylan and Alex here. Not sure if others are able to see them. Anthony, there was a question in the chat before we move on. If you're seeing people comply who don't have to, I think it's a great question. So if you want to go ahead and quickly comment on that.
I have heard of a few great stories of some events that have already started implementing this ordinance back of house before the ordinance has actually passed. I think that's awesome. I think some event venues, and we have some success stories that will be talked about later today, but I think there's a lot of movement happening with event venues of various types. Right now, the law is for only the large events that have an occupation of 3,500 or more. But there are a lot of events that have less than 3,500 or more that are already doing robust recycling and food composting or food donation programs. And so we are thinking about how do we also think about eventually addressing those entities as well as supporting and promoting those entities that are taking the right step in this direction.
Thank you. And there was one other question for you, Anthony. Can you speak to the county's capacity to accept compostable food or compostable containers at the composting facilities? And we'll just stop there, at least for a second.
Part of the amended toolkit that we're working on will address this specific issue, and it'll have specific it'll have specific composting facilities and anaerobic digester facilities that will be able to break all the things down in terms of what they're going to be able to accept and not accept, which will include compostable food containers and bags and things of that nature. So all of that will be talked about in our amended toolkit. That will be an addendum to what IEPA is providing.
Thank you, Anthony. And then the other question was, where are we with recycling facilities capacity to increase the successful diversion of recyclable materials to the market?
I don't think. A lot of the recyclers that I've talked to that we permit and regulate want more business. And so they are eager to be in conversation with our event facilities to find out how they can support the event facilities in implementing this law. So there's all sorts of recyclers that accept all sorts of materials from all sorts of event facilities, both entertainment facilities, sports facilities, cultural, religious-based facilities. There are all sorts of recyclers that have different programs for these different type of facilities. And so one of the things that we're working on with this localized toolkit and resources guide is to provide more clarity in terms of who to contact, what materials that they're focused on, what their capacity is, and things of that nature. So more to come shortly.
Sounds good. And I want to hold the next question until after our panel because we have someone who's very familiar with composting who's about to speak. So Alexandra, we will get to your question in a bit. All right. I'm going to go ahead and share again. Thanks everyone for bearing with us with the technical issues. I really, really appreciate it. What we're doing, we're kind of, that's why you see the top of my Google Chrome there, but it's just the easiest way to make sure you can see what you need to, which is the slides and then also the beautiful faces of the people here today. And so the panelists that we're about to hear from now are Dylan Blanchard from Huntington Bank Pavilion at Northerly Island. He's the venue sustainability manager. And Alex Poltorak, who is the CEO of Urban Canopy. And I am Stephanie Katsaros with Brightbeat, and I am just, wrangling and helping to steer the ship today. So with that, oops, sorry, Dylan. With that, Dylan's going to go ahead and get started and share a little bit of information, and then we'll have a little bit of further discussion after Dylan and Alex share their slides. So take it away, Dylan. Dylan, way to go, man. It was like watching someone do batting practice. You just went at him. Nice work. So we will continue to put questions in the chat for anyone who's spoken already or just any other information you want. And meanwhile, we're going to get started hearing from Alex. And advance to your slide now.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dylan, for showing the very hands-on back of house stuff that's done at crazy large festival setting like that. So kudos to you and your team. I wanted to provide some more examples and maybe slightly from the composter, the hauler perspective. I know there's a lot of food service people here, food donation, venue, government, the mix. So hopefully kind of some of the examples that I'm going to talk through, provide some slides and a kind of similar breakdown of pre, during, and post event kind of just gives you a sense that with all the diversity, even in large events, facilities, hopefully there's something here that you can see that it's very doable. I think what Dylan is doing is really amazing. Everyone's at different levels. There's no wrong thing if we're all trying and kind of improving, and hopefully get some resources here and some ideas for how to collaborate on improving. Next slide. So just in the past couple of years, past year, wanted to highlight some of the diversity of just how large facilities even function. There's ones like at the United Center where the DNC was. You're talking about a week-long event with weeks of planning, construction, and open to the public in the tens of thousands over the course of a week, and needing a lot of prep work as well as daily pickups in a highly secure setting with time restrictions. And I'll show you some photos of where the closest that we could get to as a waste hauler was blocks away. The Gordon Food Service Expo is a gigantic event, single day with over 10,000 people indoors. We have on-site staff to help with the composting. They set up 20 plus back of house kitchens, as well as over 500 exhibitors at the Donald D. Stevens Convention Center. At Navy Pier, it's just a giant tourist destination. Levy is the main food service provider, but there's also a lot of other private weddings. They were part of the DNC. They have public events and just the public coming through. Wrigley Field, where the Cubs play. There's a couple of football games and hockey games every year and lots of concerts as well. It's in the middle of a highly dense residential area, so it requires daily pickups with early morning time restrictions of where we can't be there too early, can't be there too late, including weekends. And also a venue with tens of thousands of people. And then the Chicago Marathon, half marathon, some of the 5Ks and other events. You're talking about a single day of very intense stuff, very intense security, as well as outdoors and potentially even moving locations of where different materials are, stuff like that. So I'm kind of hoping that through these examples, as well as others that we can talk about, there's something that might apply to everyone that helps manage these facilities, provides the food service or catering, yada, yada, just to give you kind of scattershot of some different stuff. Move on to the next slide, please. I think Dylan mentioned a few of these things, but also kind of reiterating that before the event is where a lot of work can be done to really simplify things, to make it more streamlined, to prevent contamination, and to really line things up for the event to go well. in a large part, I think as much of the contamination can be eliminated by forethought. The top photos are Stephanie, the DNC, food service, eco products. Jamie is on here. We were looking at different sandwich bags and what is or isn't BPI compostable, and color coordinating the trash bags, the compostable bags, the recycling bags, everything to kind of provide the systems that are going to be in place to really eliminate the need for as much sorting as possible, and to get as many things that are compostable or recyclable as possible, so that as little goes into landfill as needed. Everyone's got all these different acronyms for for what is compostable, what isn't, what it contains, how it's certified, stuff like that. One thing that was really important was to keep in mind lead times. The DNC did a lot of stuff last minute because things were ever changing, or security concerns, or this or that. So the time it takes to source something can really vary. If it's locally sourced, it has to be shipped in from somewhere else, stuff like that. And just identifying all your different streams and where they're going to go, and lining that up in advance as well, especially at giant facilities like we're talking about here. Again, we try to coordinate for a lot of these events where there's not necessarily an infrastructure that stays on site. We're the infrastructure that comes in with waste bins, compost bins, recycling bins. So needing to figure out what is going to be the total weight, the total volume, the types of containers, the number of containers, and where things are going to be staged in advance, during the event, and after the event. Like Dylan said, stuff can move around. So even a map is extremely helpful. And obviously there's a lot of delivery logistics. Oftentimes the people at the sustainability level are discussing a lot of details that need to filter down through all organizations involved, of just like when, where, who, all of that kind of stuff as well. If we can go to the next slide. During an event, personnel, I think, is the key piece. By then, everything has been set in motion, and it's just knowing that contact information is shared, a clear understanding and delineation of duties of who does what and when. And a lot of times that means day of training, when you have the actual either volunteers or temporary staff or permanent staff for something quirky. That's when you actually need to talk through what's what and make sure everyone is on the same page. For the separate streams, I think Dylan hit on a bunch of this, like really clear signage. And again, keep in mind that people won't read that very clear signage. The less mixing you have, the better, in terms of a lot of post sorting is very time intensive, like Dylan has shown with his teams. So the better you can do with pre-sorting, or just creating, cool, everything's compostable, even the plastics here. By pre-sorting, I mean that during some of our events, we even have staff going around and cleaning up streams before they get so commingled that you have to have a post-sorting process. There's a lot of customer engagement, whoever your customer is. That can be back of house, front of house, the public, whoever. But just sometimes, even talking to people as stuff gets put into containers so that they kind of see what should go where. And inevitably, we've had a lot of times of where the stuff that's especially open to the public, it just fills up quickly. Stuff oftentimes comes really nicely packed. When you get a case of cups, it's a cubic box. But when all those cups are tossed out into the compost or recycling, it overflows from all that air. So a lot of times you need to do restocking, resetting, swapping, or emptying of all your different containers and vessels. And kind of showing a few different situations here at Navy Pier, where stuff was pre-staged. At the Gordon Food Service Show, specifically having recycling and compost clearly labeled containers throughout the venue, as well as like some of our compost bins and how we have to continuously swap those indoors, outdoors, wherever. Next slide, please. I wrote simple as a joke, and I was even thinking that with all the alphabet people here, just remember FSLRTC. No, just kidding. At the end of an event, it takes a while to even find where all of the stuff went. It's not at all where you left it. Where we delivered it as the hauler is oftentimes not where it ended up, and it doesn't end up back in the same place. So first and foremost, we a lot of times have to find where all the stuff is or where it got left. Yeah, super easy mnemonic device, you're right. A lot of times we have to sort what went where. Obviously, a lot of post sorting, like Dylan said, but there's even if it's not within each bag, you have to separate out the different containers and the different streams that they go to. In our case, we have to load everything up to take it with us. In one of these pictures with our green bins, that's actually NASCAR, and all of Grant Park and Millennium Park kind of becomes a giant city with multi-tier buildings, and then a few days later it all gets knocked down. So where we load, taking everything back with us, kind of leaving no trace, is an important piece as well. In the top right, it's a little tough to see, but where our truck was collecting the materials is like 4 blocks away from the United Center. You can barely see it. So coordinating a lot of that effort of, who even brought our containers back to where we were for security purposes, even allowed to enter, is a whole thing. Similar to Dylan, we do a lot of record keeping of compostable weight and materials, as well as any contamination or issues or stuff like that. We do the transportation back to either our warehouse to continue the process or directly to the compost facility. And that's where the composting actually happens. So I have a photo here at the bottom of Whole Earth Compost on the far southeast side of Chicago, of where it can be like, it's mainly giant windrows where food waste, other compostable products are mixed with different kinds of landscape waste, wood chips, stuff like that, to create a finished compost product. And that's kind of, again, or trying to simplify a process that can be very diverse and very different at different venues. So you guys can see a few of the examples of how things are done. And I'll pass to the next slide.
Did we miss anything?
Wow.
Alex?
Oh, for me, no, just a big thanks to Steph and everyone for organizing this, and all the venues, and Anthony and the county being, looking ahead to how to do things well together and learning from each other. So really appreciate that.
So I will tell you, audience, that we did have some questions that we were going to talk through, but in the interest of time, I don't want to do that. So thank you, Dylan, for answering so many that were raised while you were speaking. I don't know if anything specifically, Alex, when Alexandra asked a question in the chat, I had held off on it being answered. Other people have answered it now, but just based on your experience as a compost hauler working with processors, she's asking, how are you managing the rate of compostable food containers per load? I recently saw a presentation about the importance of the ratio and it impacting decomposition rates. Not expecting you to get into the weeds on that, but just based upon your collection, for example, for the marathon, where it might be a lot of, specific items, or a stadium and other things, or festivals that we've worked on and things. Anything you'd like to add about that?
I think specific, it will depend, kind of like Catherine's answer here, for how it is for different compost facilities, of what ratios they use or how it impacts operations. Typically for us, we collect a lot of food waste because it's a lot of it is a residential program where it's primarily food waste, and a lot of the commercial customers that we have a lot of back of house food waste and pre-consumer food waste. For us, it hasn't been an issue of trying to measure these ratios, and oftentimes it's kind of the opposite, that for a lot of food waste, you need to add different kinds of brown matter and something that'll absorb all that moisture, that water, and help it break down with some aeration. So we haven't had any issues with just the sheer volume of something compostable. It can, sometimes, like from the marathon, for sure, one of the images I had there was that we get entire truckloads of just the paper cups from the events, but that's, again, not a material that's especially hard to break down compared to other kinds of compostable plastics. We use BioBag for our compostable liners. We've used a few different other brands as well. And they're also very good at breaking down really quickly because they absorb moisture fairly easily.
Thank you. And that is definitely, I mean, I think it's a great question and something that when you're working with your compost hauler, and hopefully there is a strong line of communication between the venue, the hauler, and the processor, that feedback loop about what materials are you anticipating, what quantities, and even, you know, sort of what ratios, you're communicating that so that you can determine how to manage it. I know with the DNC, when we determined that it wasn't that far away, Alex, but it was, you know, looking at the building, maybe one city block, I guess. When we determined that we wouldn't be able to sort anywhere, we called Whole Earth and had a call with them and said, okay, you know, you're going to be receiving what Urban Canopy takes to you from us. We need to know how it looks. And we had eco-educators at every single station throughout United Center's concourse and in other spaces. And the eco-educators did a good enough job that the compost stream was clean for the bins that were filled front of house. And the ones that were filled back of house by the kitchen were perfectly clean. Go Levy. And so, but we were in communication, and the next morning we found out, you know, whether or not they were clean. So like, I just encourage people to really communicate with your suppliers to make sure that before the fact, they know what to expect. And as soon as it comes, if it's a multi-day event or an ongoing partnership, that you really communicate. And so with that, I'm going to break from the two panelists who just spoke to address Walter's question, because I know there is, you know, 25% of the people here are government. And Walter with the Solid Waste Agency of Lake County, who does tons of work in support of the compost industry and all stakeholders. Thank you, Walter. He has asked the question, assuming that the state's attorney's office is taking the lead in drafting the ordinance, are they comfortable with setting dates for compliance that are not in the law, actually contradict it, he says, and for back of house and front of house, again, not addressed in the law. And so essentially, Anthony, can you speak to how your interpretation and drafting of an ordinance is appropriate? If so, and knowing that there's people across the state on the call, your information is useful to other counties and other municipalities who are wondering, you know, how am I going to implement this program?
Great question, Walter. Thank you for putting me on hotspot. But it's a great question. Our draft proposed ordinance does not conflict with the state law. In our draft proposed ordinance, we do say that the law is already in effect. The state law went into effect January 1st of this year. What our draft proposed ordinance does, though, is empower our Cook County Department of Environment staff to actually enforce the state law. That's the one thing it does do. And then that's based on our staffing capacity. If municipal governments, we have 134 municipalities within the city, within Cook County. If municipalities within Cook County want to enforce this state law and go beyond the scope of what we're proposing with our phased-in approach, they have that ability to do that as well. What we're creating is a minimum standard in terms of what we're going to be doing in suburban Cook County with our current staffing capacity. But if municipal governments want to go beyond the scope of what we're doing, our draft ordinance does not prohibit them from doing that.
So assuming Walter doesn't have a follow-up question, then we'll move on. And Joel, if your question wasn't answered in the chat, it caught my attention when it said receives funding from the state of Illinois, because I recall that being an early iteration of this law. So if you do have another question, okay, cool, you're good. Then the other item that was related to the ordinance, Rebecca has asked, there was mention of mandated reporting for venues participating in this waste diversion. Could you speak more on this?
Yes, so one of the things that we're working on is an inspection checklist, as well as what that reporting checklist would look like. And so we're looking at the best practices of other states and localities that have implemented similar large event recycling bills to see how they have structured their reporting requirements. And when we have created our own draft reporting requirements, we'll share that with the event venues for their thoughts and opinions to engage them in this process as well. We're not going to be doing this thing. Event venues will not be caught off guard. We are actively trying to engage event venues in this process so they'll be able to tell us if this will work or if they have other suggestions or ideas. We will be engaging them in this process as well.
And I think that that's a great point. And we'll start to wrap up here. And the sincere desire to engage venues and food service operators and compost haulers and processors who are, we can only divert food waste if it's being processed. So we need to figure out what composters can receive. The same thing with material recovery facilities, MRFs. They are our friends. If we don't send what is recyclable to a MRF, it won't get recycled. So understanding what they need and in what manner it can come to them is what we're trying to do. Just really all work together to figure this out. It's way easier to do it how we do it now. Let's be honest. And it's cheaper because landfill tipping fees are low in Illinois, but it's not going to stay that way. And so that was why we tried to get ahead of this, knowing this legislation was going to come. We're talking to California. People are talking to California and other states where these types of legislations have gone into effect and they've survived and things have gone well and services have flourished and kind of everybody can win. And it's happening here too. I believe, what did the Cubs say? 143 tons were composted last year, 3.5 tons of food donation, tons of material donations. These are, voluntary acts that venues are doing. All the Waste Not Compost, who's one of our sponsors, Urban Canopy, who's here on the screen, Collective Resource, who does the hauling for Live Nation and elsewhere. They've all got rosters of clients and customers, and many of them are, commercial office spaces with big, either kitchens that they're dealing with or cafeterias. They're composting and those streams are getting processed locally. So, it's happening. We just know that a stadium and an arena and a convention center and, event people know how chaotic it is. So we just, and those of us who work with venues know how chaotic it is. So that's why we're all trying to help each other. That's sincerely why this is all going down. So, so with that, sorry, I got going there. I want to make sure we covered the questions that were in the chat before we move on to the toolkit. And I just want to say that SB 2878 was the Senate bill, that HB 1370, I think, might have been the House bill, and then it was a Senate bill, and then it went into effect. It became a public act. So what the link that was shared earlier in the chat, that's ILGA, I think, the Illinois General Assembly, that is the link that has the details on, what the legislation looks like. So I'm going to pause and somebody speak up if there's a question in the chat that hasn't been answered yet. And if that's not the case, I want to give a quick glimpse to the toolkit for everybody. So I'm going to go ahead and share a different screen here. Okay, so what you're seeing here is the phase 2, I guess, of the original draft of the toolkit, and it is being called a collaborative iteration because this is today's version. This is literally what I PDF'd just before we started today's meeting, but it is changing because comments are being added into a Google Doc, and then they're being either, directly edited that way, what should I say? The suggestions are being accepted. The links are being added. The beautiful photographs, thank you, Tracy, are being input. And so this is really getting developed by everybody. But we're going to walk through some of the elements of it now so you can really understand how we need your help to make this what it needs to be for everybody. So the page one, and I should begin by saying that the Illinois EPA Environmental Education Team, Eli, I believe, is on the call now, but their team really did the framework and the majority of the content that you see here. They did it, they brought it to a working group that's trying to bring this together. And again, edits were made. Those who participated in our listening and working session or the town hall we had in November and January, respectively, you know, that's who's done it so far. But this first page really gets into kind of the legal elements, the state mandates. And I want to highlight a couple of things. The Material Management Advisory Committee, you know, when they met, and some folks who were participating in that are here today, they really put together, you know, a lot of advice and guidance on what led to, I think, the ordinance happening and the toolkit and the where it will go. The Illinois EPA's website has information that you can find. There's also a City of Chicago LRS story map. You know, folks want to know where their material's going, and the City of Chicago put a lot of work into, with the help of Lakeshore Recycling Services, LRS, creating a map that shows you, you know, from your house, because this is residential focused, but from your house, this item is going to this end market. And so that's kind of cool, and we're just highlighting it. Next is the reuse. We're starting at the top of the hierarchy and looking at food and drinkware. There are not, to our knowledge, many examples of entities that are either utilizing reuse infrastructure or providing such infrastructure. That which we know have been highlighted here, but having, you know, I don't know if folks who are involved in reuse are on the call, but please get in touch. We're going to provide means to get in touch. And we want to make sure that folks who know, folks who are providing this, those who want it know how to reach you. Upstream has a map where it does highlight Soldier Field. Bold Reuse has a program going on there in their United Club. It is prominently featured. So we got one, and hopefully there's others. I believe Reuso has a project at Lincoln Park Zoo. So there are others, but you know, we want to get them all here. So that's where we want everyone to submit your information so it can be added here. There's also case studies, and Becky included the idea of it. Good job, Becky. I didn't realize that was still there. But so we're inputting these things when we get them. Again, under reuse, I've already said that. Oh, sorry. No, this is about food recovery. So, you know, concerns around donating food, I think, have largely diminished when folks realize that the Good Samaritan Act protects those who are donating in good faith. Also, food safety standards that everyone from, you know, grocery stores to stadiums to food manufacturing, they have to adhere to them. Well, those are the same health standards that you have to adhere to when food switches from being sold or served to being donated. But we want to make those things clear here. There are best practices. Folks who have something to contribute, please do. In terms of local food recovery infrastructure and partner lists, kudos to the Natural Resources Defense Council project, Food Matters Chicago, and the departments, various departments from the city of Chicago who worked together on building lots of things out, including composting, but Brightbeat and the Department of Public Health specifically focused and worked on the Chicago Food Rescue Assessment. And when we're able to share the maps and databases of local food recovery infrastructure, we will. That should be happening fairly soon. And additionally, there are others out there. The Chicagoland Food Sovereignty Coalition, a group of mutual aid organizations, they have a website where you can contact them and determine where maybe food can be rescued. There are other sources out there. So that's where the toolkit is headed. here on the recycling page, there are links. We mentioned, oh, sorry, this is a different link. LRS has created a blueprint for waste diversion that largely focuses on recycling. It is not yet published, but as soon as it is, this link will be live to everybody. But thank you to LRS. Also, Eco Products provided a link in the chat to their CERC. I'm not going to remember what CERC stands for right now, but similar to another resource that it comes later. These resources are available to you. They're free. They've already been worked hard on by experts and vetted. These are here in the toolkit. There's always more to add, and that's why these yellow highlights are encouraging people to look there and find what you might have to share. So on the composting side, we're going to kind of go quickly through this. The Illinois Food Scrap and Composting Coalition has various links that support finding haulers, support best practices, front of house and back of house to have a composting, or should I say organics recycling program. And lastly, additional resources. This is where a lot of items will be added. We've received links. The Contamination Mitigation Program workbook. It's live right now. That was the one Eco Products put together. It is a dense spreadsheet of every step you need to take to prevent contamination at your venue in a compost program. And I could go on and on about each one of these. Compostable Chicago study, it came before CERC. There are 4 venues in Chicago who essentially we went through that same process where we identified what makes a program successful, recycling and composting. And so I will stop there, but want to let you all know that this is a living document, and it's something that we want folks' feedback on. And, you know, the last slide, it just says that, well, I can still put it up, but it is saying that you can tell us what other resources are needed. So in this sort of brief amount of time that we have, sorry about that. Oh, now you're seeing my last, isn't that so cute? But that's not the slide we're on. This is the slide we're on. Other resources that are needed. We are just about at time. I would encourage anyone to add it to the chat right now if there is something that you think we've missed that's obvious, or get off mute and just speak up. The floor is yours. I know that's a lot to ask with 3 minutes left and 100 people on the call. Justin.
Hi, everyone. Some of you know me. Some of you have not seen me in a while. Some of you I do not know, but I'm Justin Zellner. I'm currently the president of a nonprofit called the Wave Foundation. And 30 years of this work culminating to this call. I applaud the state of Illinois to take this measure. We've always have thought nationally that, you know, policy is important. However, with policy has to be a structured and very functional operating plan. And of course, you're all working on that right now, which I think is fantastic. Just quickly, about 25 so years ago, working for the Trailblazers, the NBA team, and the Moda Center Arena in Portland, we sort of took the lead role of these processes, took the facility from an 18% landfill diversion to a 98% landfill diversion, kind of developed the standards that we see now across the country. We developed an organization called the Green Sports Alliance in order to share our best practices and enhance that across the country, then flipped over to the European Union to help them establish these systems. So that's just a little bit of background for those of you that don't know who I am. I just wanted to add, I'm happy to help. I don't know how to help, but a lot of the discussions here today, you know, Live Nation was one of the early adopters of scaling these systems. But a couple things that were mentioned that I just wanted to highlight real quick. The cultural adoption is incredibly important. And I say this for 2 reasons. One, there's many layers to a corporation, right? There's contractors, internal staff, external customers. supply chain, all that stuff. So adopting policies and practices to operationalize things, but also create a culture so that failure isn't even an option anymore is critically important. That being said, I just wanted to make one more comment. Without the proper infrastructure in place, if employees and staff and customers start to support what you're doing, but the infrastructure is not available, things end up not being recycled or not being composted because of the lack of infrastructure, it will critically destroy the momentum. So it's very important to have things, your house in order, and be in lockstep, like with all the, like with the state and the composters, the recyclers, the MRFs, but your cleaning staff, your housekeeping staff, all that stuff that has to go on with everybody in your organization. Just wanted to highlight, very, very important not to start making progress without all of that in alignment. Because once there's a narrative that happens within a culture that why does it matter? It doesn't matter anyways. People will stop actually making that progress. So, hi everyone, good to see you.
Thank you, Justin. Yeah, although the Chicago Sustainability Task Force predates the Green Sports Alliance, I just love saying that. It sounds petty, but it just makes me giggle. But seriously, from the beginning, we've had our eye on the Green Sports Alliance and feel very aligned in what that is as in terms of nationwide support. The strong understanding and I think belief of local partners here is that we need to know how to do it locally. Like the toolkit, the playbook, the advice, the recipe for success, like those are critical. But if you don't know how to make it work here, within the constraints, like you just said, of your given municipality, county, or state, that's kind of where the secret sauce that we all want to share is. And so I think we shouldn't recreate things, but find the best resources, hence the toolkit and these links to resources. And then the willingness, our Midwest way of being, willingness to work together, I think is what we're really trying to lean into. So with that, I want to give the IEPA and Cook County and IRF a chance to just share some final thoughts before we wrap up. And sorry and thank you. We're 2 minutes over. We'll be done in just a minute, but I do think we have some important things to say before everyone heads out. So Eli, if you want to.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Stephanie mentioned my name just a second ago, but for those of you I don't know, I'm the Environmental Education Coordinator for Illinois EPA for Northern Illinois. So I've been working alongside Stephanie and lots of other folks on the call today to really produce a toolkit that we hope is robust and useful, but also statewide, and really a sort of first step document that will then sort of lead into county level and more localized contextual how-tos as well. So since we're at time, I'll just say we've appreciated all the feedback that we've got from folks so far, and we're working to incorporate that. And for sure, as Stephanie mentioned, send us additional resources that you think we could link to in this document, or as well as support contacts for particular groups that we might be able to list on the document too. So thanks for your time, everyone, today. I learned a lot on the call, and I'm sure lots of others have as well. Oh, I think you're on mute, Stephanie.
Thank you. We still have a couple more final words. I just wanted to put the picture up because I love it. And want to say that to Eli's point of what you can share, there will be, everyone who registered for this will receive a link, as I wrote this in the chat, a link to the toolkit. The latest iteration is going to go back to the same link we used previously. We just had to pull it down to print it and share it today, but also a form to share information. And so that will be coming. And then I want to pass it to Anthony.
I just wanted to thank Stephanie, the Chicago Sustainability Task Force, the Illinois EPA, the Illinois Recycling Foundation, and the Illinois Food Scrap and Composting Association for all their hard work with moving this conversation forward. We really appreciate this collaboration, and we want to work to make sure that this law is enforced in a sustainable manner, in a friendly manner here in suburban Cook County and in this region. So thank you all.
Thanks, Anthony. And Claire?
Sure, yeah. It was an honor to work with all the other partners on putting this webinar together. Thank you guys so much. And I would just say I think Steph's absolutely right that you know, where the rubber really hits the road is figuring out how to make things work locally with the resources available. I hope every, you know, I hope every venue can view their county's recycling coordinator as a resource there. I think IRF and also some of our, you know, partner groups, especially for the conference, are going to work hard to really forge those connections between venues and recycling partners, whether it's private sector or those county representatives who really have that local information. Where are your compost facilities? Who are your haulers? You know, what are the contamination protocols locally? So just keep that in mind, and thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Claire. And I think she just said it. I was reading the chat, but the meeting has been recorded. We will share that which can be shared. The majority of the content can be shared, and that will be provided in the coming weeks, as well as a link to the Canva presentation, which has embedded links in it. So that will all be coming to you, all who registered. And again, you know, the counties want to support this, want to support you in doing this. And this isn't our last conversation. So we'll end it there. It's 3:07. Have a great day and a weekend, and wishing you all the best. Thanks for being here. I'll stick around just for a minute in case anybody has follow-up questions.